Autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, Part 2, Section 7, Chapters 30 through 33. Chapter 30. The more I sought for rest, the more I was annoyed with all sorts of embarrassments, being thus daily exposed to divers persecutions. I pondered which of two courses I ought to take, whether to decamp and leave France to the devil, or else to fight this battle, though I had done the rest, and see to what end God had made me. For a long while I kept anxiously revolving the matter. At last I resolved to make off, dreading my tempt, my evil fortune, lest this should bring me to the gallows. My dispositions were all fixed, and I had made arrangements for putting away the property I could not carry, and for changing the lighter articles, to the best of my ability, upon myself and servants. Yet it was with great and heavy reluctance that I looked forward to such a departure. I had shut myself up alone in a little study. My young men were advising me to fly, but I told them that it would be well for me to meditate this step in solitude, although I very much inclined to their opinion. Indeed, I reasoned that if I could escape imprisonment, and let the storm pass over, I should be able to explain matters to the king by letter, setting forth the trap which had been laid to ruin me by the malice of my enemies. And as I have said above, my mind was made up to this point, when just as I rose to act on the decision, some power took me by the shoulder and turned me round, and I heard a voice which cried with vehemence, "Benvenuto, do as thou art wont, and fear not." Then on the instant I changed the whole course of my plans, and said to my Italians, "Take your good arms and come with me, obey me to the letter, have no other thought, for I am now determined to put in my appearance. If I were to leave Paris, you would vanish the next day in smoke. Do so as I command, and follow me." They all began together with one heart and voice to say, "Since we are here and draw our livelihood from him, it is our duty to go with him, and bear him out so long as we have life to execute what he proposes. He has hit the mark better than we did in this matter, for on the instant when he leaves the place, his enemies will send us to the devil. Let us keep well in mind what great works we have begun here, and what vast importance they possess. We should not know how to finish them without him, and his enemies would say that he had taken flight because he shrank before such undertakings." Many other things bearing weightily upon the subject were said among them, but it was the young Roman, Marcone, who first put heart into the company, and he also raised recruits from the Germans and the Frenchmen, who felt well disposed toward me. We were 10 men, all counted. I set out, firmly resolved not to let myself be taken and imprisoned alive. When we appeared before the judges for criminal affairs, I found Caterina and her mother waiting, and on the moment of my arrival the 2 women were laughing with their advocate. I pushed my way in, and called boldly for the judge, who was seated, blown out big and fat, upon a tribunal high above the rest. On catching sight of me, he threatened with his head, and spoke in a subdued voice, "Although your name is Benvenuto, this time you are an ill-comer." I understood his speech, and called out the second time, "Dispatch my business quickly. Tell me what I have come to do here." Then the judge turned to Caterina and said, "Caterina, relate all that happened between you and Benvenuto." She answered that I had used her after the Italian fashion. The judge turned to me and said, "You hear what Caterina disposes, Benvenuto." I replied, "If I have consorted with her after the Italian fashion, I have only done the same as you folk of other nations do." He demurred. "She means that you improperly abused her." I retorted that, so far from being the Italian fashion, it must be some French habit, seeing she knew all about it, while I was ignorant, and I commanded her to explain precisely how I had consorted with her. Then the impudent baggage entered into plain and circumstantial details regarding all the filth she lyingly accused me of. I made her repeat her disposition 3 times in succession. When she had finished, I cried out with a loud voice, "Lord Judge, Lieutenant of the most Christian King, I call on you for justice. Well I know that by the laws of his most Christian Majesty, both agent and patient in this kind of crime are punished with the stake. The woman confesses her guilt. I admit nothing whatsoever of the sort with regard to her. Her go-between of a mother is here, who deserves to be burned for either one or the other offense. Therefore I appeal to you for justice." These words are repeated over and over again at the top of my voice, continually calling out, "To the stake with her and her mother!" I also threatened the judge that, if he did not send her to prison there before me, I would go to the king at once, and tell him how his lieutenant in criminal affairs of justice had wronged me. When they heard what a tumult I was making, my adversaries lowered their voices, but I lifted mine the more. The little hussy and her mother fell to weeping, while I shouted to the judge, "Fire! Fire! To the stake with them!" The coward on the bench, finding that the matter was not going as he intended, began to use soft words and excuse the weakness of the female sex. Thereupon I felt that I had won the victory in a nasty encounter, and muttering threats between my teeth, I took myself off, not without great inward satisfaction. Indeed, I would gladly have paid 500 crowns down to have avoided that appearance in court. However, after escaping from the tempest, I thanked God with all my heart, and returned in gladness with my young men to the castle. Chapter 31. When adverse fortune, or if we prefer to call it, our malignant planet, undertakes to persecute a man, it never lacks new ways of inquiring them, of injuring them. So now, when I thought I had emerged from this tempestuous sea of troubles, and hoped my civil star would leave me quiet for a moment, it began to set two schemes in motion against me before I had recovered my breath from that great struggle. Within 3 days 2 things have happened, each of which brought my life into extreme hazard. One of these occurred in this way. I went to Fontainebleau to consult with the king, for he had written me a letter saying he wanted me to stamp the coins of his whole realm, and enclosing some little drawings to explain his wishes in the matter. At the same time he left me to freely execute them as I liked, upon which I made new designs according to my own conception, and according to the ideal of art. When I reached Fontainebleau, one of the treasurers commissioned by the king to defray my expenses, he was called Monsignor della Fa, addressed me in these words: "Benvenuto, the painter, Bologna, has obtained commission from the king to execute your great Colossus, and all the orders previously given as on your behalf have been transferred to him. We are all indignant, and it seems to us that countryman of yours has acted towards you in a most unwarrantable manner. The work has assigned you on the strength of your models and studies. He is robbing you of it only through the favor of Madame d'Etampes, and though several months have passed since he received the order, he has not yet made any sign of commencing it." I answered in surprise, "How is it possible that I should have heard nothing at all about this?" He then informed me that the man had kept it very dark, and had obtained the king's commission with great difficulty, since his Majesty at first would not concede it. Only the importunity of Madame d'Etampes secured this favor for him. When I felt how gratefully and how wrongfully I had been betrayed, and saw a work which I had gained with my great toil thus stolen from me, I made my mind up for a serious stroke of business, and marched off with my good sword at my side to find Bologna. He was asked in his room, engaged in studies. After telling the servant to introduce me, he greeted me with some of his Lombard compliments, and asked what good business had brought me hither. I replied, "A most excellent business, and what of great importance." He then sent for wine, and said, "Before we begin to talk, we must drink together, for such is the French custom." I answered, "Messer Francesco, you must know that the conversation we have to engage in does not call for drinking at the commencement. After it is over, perhaps we shall be glad to take a glass." Then I opened the matter this way: "All men who wish to pass for persons of worth allow it to be seen that they are so by their actions. If they do the contrary, they lose the name of honest men. I am aware that you knew the king had commissioned me with the great Colossus. It had been talked of these 18 months past, yet neither you nor anybody else came forward to speak a word about it. By my great labors I made myself down to his Majesty, who approved of my models and gave the work into my hands. During many months I have heard nothing to the contrary. Only this morning I was informed that you have got hold of it, and have filched it from me. I earned it by the talents I displayed, and you are robbing me of it merely by your idle talking. Chapter 32. To this speech Bologna answered, O Benvenuto, all men try to push their affairs in every way they can. If this is the king's will, what have you to say against it? You would only throw away your time, because I have it now, and it is mine. Now tell me what you choose, and I will listen to you. I replied, I should like you to know, Messer Francesco, that I could say much which would prove irrefragably, and make you admit that such ways of acting as you have described and used are not in vogue among rational animals. I will, however, come quickly to the point at issue, give close attention to my meaning, because the affair is serious. He made as though he would rise from the chair on which he was sitting, since he saw my color heightened and my features greatly discomposed. I told him that the time had not yet come for moving. He had better sit and listen to me. Then I recommended Messer Francesco. You know that I first received the work, and that the time has long gone by during which by right could be reasonably disputed by anyone. Now I tell you that I shall be satisfied if you will make a model, while I make another in addition to the one I have already shown. Then we will make them without any clamor to our great king, and whatsoever in this way I shall have gained the credit of the best design, I will justly have deserved the commission. If it falls for you, I will dismiss from my mind the memory of the great injury you have done me, and will bless your hands as being worthier than mine. If so glorious a performance, let us abide by this arrangement, and we shall be friends, otherwise we must be enemies, and God, who always helps the right, and I, who know how to assert it, will show you to what extent you have done wrong. Messer Francesco answered, the work is mine, and since it has been given to me, I do not choose to put what is my own to hazard. To this I retorted, Messer Francesco, if you will not take the right course, which is just and reasonable, I will show you another which shall be like your own, that is to say, ugly and disagreeable. I tell you plainly that if I ever hear that you have spoken one single word about this work of mine, I will kill you like a dog. We are neither in Rome, nor in Bologna, nor in Florence. Here one lives in quite a different fashion. If then it comes to my ears that you talk about this to the king or anybody else, I vow that I will kill you. Reflect upon the way you mean to take, whether that for good, which I formerly described, or this later bad one I have just now set before you. The man did not know what to say or do, as I was inclined to cut the matter short upon the spot, rather than to postpone action. Bologna found no other words than these to utter. If I act like a man of honesty, I shall stand in no fear. I replied, you have spoken well, but if you act otherwise, you will have to fear, because the affair is serious. Upon this I left him, and betook myself to the king. With his Majesty I disputed some time about the fashion of his coinage, a point upon which we were not of the same opinion. His council, who were present, kept persuading him that the monies ought to be struck in the French style, as they had hitherto always been done. I urged in reply that his Majesty had sent for me from Italy in order that I might execute good work. If he now wanted me to do the contrary, I could not bring myself to submit. So the matter was postponed till another occasion, and I set off again at once for Paris. Chapter 33. I had but just dismounted from my horse, when one of those excellent people who rejoice in mischief-making came to tell me that Pagolo Messere had taken a house for the little hussy Caterina and her mother, and that he was always going there, and whenever he mentioned me, used words of scorn to this effect: Benvenuto set the fox to watch the grapes, and thought I would not eat them. Now he is satisfied with going about and talking big, and thinks I am afraid of him. But I have girt this sword and dagger to my side, in order to show him that my steel can cut as well as his, and that I too am a Florentine of the Messeri, a far better family than his Cellini. The scoundrel who reported this poisonous gossip struck it with such a good effect, that I felt a fever in the instant swoop upon me. And when I say fever, I mean fever, and no mere metaphor. The insane passion which took possession of me might have been my death, had I not resolved to give it vent as the occasion offered. I ordered the Ferris workman, Chioccia, to come with me, and made a servant follow with my house. When we reached the house where that worthless villain was, I found the door ajar, and entered. I noticed that he carried sword and dagger, and was sitting on a big chest, with his arm round Caterina's neck. At the moment of my arrival, I could hear that he and her mother were talking about me. Pushing the door open, I drew my sword, and set the point of it at his throat, not giving him the time to think whether he too carried steel. At the same instant I cried out, "Vile coward! Recommend your soul to God, for you are a dead man." Without budging from his seat, he called 3 times, "Mother, mother, help me!" though I had come there fully determined to take his life. Half my fury ebbed away when I heard this idiotic exclamation. I ought to add that I had told Chioccia not to let the girl or her mother leave the house, since I meant to deal with those trollops after I had disposed of their bully. So I went on, holding my sword at his throat, and now and then just pricked him with the point, pouring out a torrent of terrific threats at the same time. But when I found he did not stir a finger in his own defense, I began to wonder what I should do next. My menacing attitude could not be kept up forever, so at last it came into my head to make them merry, and complete my vengeance at a later period. Accordingly, I formed my resolution, and began, "Take that ring, coward, from your finger, and marry her, that I may get satisfaction from you afterwards, according to your deserts." He replied at once, "If only you do not kill me, I will do whatever you command." "Then," said I, "put that ring upon her hand." When the sword's point was withdrawn a few inches from his throat, he wedded her with the ring. But I added, "This is not enough. I shall send for 2 notaries, in order that the marriage may be ratified by contract." Bidding Chioccia go for the lawyers, I turned to the girl and her mother, and using the French language, spoke as follows: "Notaries and witnesses are coming. The first of you who blabs about this affair will be killed upon the spot. Nay, I will murder you all 3, so beware and keep a quiet tongue in your hands." To him I said in Italian, "If you offer any resistance to what I shall propose, upon the slightest word you utter, I will stab you till your guts run out upon this floor." He answered, "Only promise not to kill me, and I will do whatever you command." The notaries and witnesses arrived. A contract, valid and in due form, was drawn up. Then my heat and forever left me. I paid the lawyers and took my departure. On the following day Bologna came to Paris on purpose, and sent for me through Matteo del Nassaro. I went to see him, and he met me with a glad face, entreating me to regard him as a brother, and saying that he would never speak about that work again, since he recognized quite well that I was right. Section 7.